Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Welcome to the Infowars Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Thursday, May 7th, 2015. Today, a federal appeals court, unanimously with the 3 judges there, said that the NSA's collection of phone data is illegal. The headline says that it's excessive, but they actually said it's illegal. Nevertheless, they refused to expel the elephant from the room. They're going back and appealing to Congress to write some clearer laws. I think the Fourth Amendment has been very clear all along, and so has the FISA Act, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. They say the bulk collection of Americans' phone records by the government exceeds what Congress has allowed, and the court is asking Congress to step in, decide how to best balance national security and privacy interests. There is no balance to be made. There is no trade-off to be made. We will only have national security when we first protect individual privacy, individual liberty. If we trample on that, none of us are secure. We are living in a fantasy if we think that. We have given up our freedoms and our security and our privacy to live in a prison security state. They also asked the Congress to better define, as they say, where these boundaries exist. But if you look at the New York Times, they point out that they found that this is illegal. And as I said before, if it's illegal, why won't they do a stay? See, they're not even going to stop the process from the national security. They are so afraid of the NSA that they won't say stop it until we take this to a higher level. This is going to work its way up the courts, but of course right now they're appealing to Congress, and the Patriot Act is coming up for reauthorization. So we see in this article from USA Today, NSA program opponents and Congress urge the Patriot Act to be changed after this Supreme Court ruling. This is a quote from Senator Patrick Leahy, Democrat of Vermont. He says the dragnet collection of Americans' phone records is unnecessary and ineffective, and is now a federal appeal court has found that the program is illegal. How about that? Unnecessary, ineffective, and illegal. So why don't we stop it? Why don't we enforce the Constitution? And you know what? It isn't like we just figured this out. We were told this by William Binney and the other NSA whistleblowers over a decade ago, after September 11th. They said this is illegal. It is unconstitutional. It violates the Fourth Amendment. It exceeds the authority under FISA. They went to Congress. They informed Congress. And for all of this time, Congress has done nothing but rubber stamp it. Everyone is afraid of the CIA. Everyone is afraid of the NSA in Washington. Now, to go on, he points out, of course, this is on the other side. We have, of course, John McCain, always in favor of the security state. He says, I think we have to have the ability to monitor communications. Everybody's communications is what they want to do. And he says, Congress needs to come up again with some kind of a balance. That's the way they incrementally enact this infrastructure of tyranny. Stay with us, because in the last section of the program, Rob Dew is going to come in and we're going to talk about all of this infrastructure of tyranny, this legal and technological infrastructure that they've created, and how it is tied to Jade Helm 15. Remember the logo? Master the human domain? They mean something very specific about that. It is tied into the surveillance state, and we're going to break that down for you at the end of this show. Now, we got one court that said today that this is all illegal. Nevertheless, and of course that's getting our phone calls and that sort of thing they're collecting. But then there's the StingRay program that the police are operating, that Homeland Security is operating. That was also said by a court to be illegal. But earlier this week, we had another appeal court overturn that ruling. So now we got contradictory rulings between these different courts. We have to understand that we don't need a bunch of politically appointed lawyers to read the Constitution for us. It's very plain. We need to take this into our own hands and say, we're not going to allow these congressmen to sit here and do nothing. We're going to throw them out. We're going to violate or nullify their laws with jury nullification, with state nullification, with whatever we can do. Now, this is an article from Wired Magazine, and it says the U.S. Circuit Court has handed privacy advocates a surprising reversal on a landmark pro-privacy decision. And this was a man who had been tracked by cops as he went on a 3-month robbery spree. Okay, so he's robbing houses for 3 months before they do anything. That's the first takeaway from this. But of course, they did all this without a search warrant. They could have gotten a search warrant, but I guess maybe it's just inconvenient. That's not really the issue. They're not even talking to most courts about this because they've got a non-disclosure agreement that they signed with Harris Corporation that created the technology that they say is more important than the legal system, more important than their oath to the Constitution or their job supposedly to uphold the law. It makes it very clear once again, just like we see with the trade agreements that are going on, transatlantic, trans-Pacific, these people work for the corporations. They don't work for the you and I. They don't work for the Constitution. They don't obey their oath. And this came out. This was a panel of 11th Circuit judges. They overturned the ruling from the same circuit court made just last year in U.S. versus Davis. They say the new ruling instead finds that because Davis's phone location data wasn't his property. Here's the third-party doctrine again. This is what Rand Paul nailed Jay Johnson, the head of DHS, Homeland Security. He asked him specifically about third-party data, and Jay Johnson pretended that he didn't know what that was. Now, either the guy is incredibly stupid or he's an unbelievable liar, an unmitigated liar. I think it's probably the latter. Anyway, they find that this property wasn't his, but it belonged to his phone carrier. See, that is the legal fiction that allows them to do this kind of vacuuming up of your data. It's the same kind of legal fiction that says they can do civil asset forfeiture because your property was an accessory in a crime. So it's not a criminal action. The Constitution doesn't come into play. And they can just take your property because your property is bad. And it doesn't have any civil liberties because it's an inanimate object. But nevertheless, even though it's an inanimate object, it still created a crime. So now they say, well, this third-party data that's out there, that belongs to your phone carrier. And they can just voluntarily turn it over to us when we ask them, because if they don't play ball like that, they won't get these kinds of area monopolies like we give the phone companies. To give you another idea of how bad this is getting, because it's not just looking at our virtual presence, but they're monitoring us physically. And of course, we know they're going to be tracking all the cars. Right now, they can't wait just a couple of years until they get mandated boxes in all the cars to track us, of course. They've got cameras everywhere. They got license plate readers that they're putting everywhere. Look at this story from today on Infowars.com. Town installs license plate scanning cameras in cactuses. I mean, this is like something from the old comedy spy show, Get Smart. They put up these fake cactuses. You can see the picture of that thing there with a camera in it. The one with the camera in it is a fake cactus. I thought at first they had dug a hole in a cactus plant and stuck a camera in there, but that's actually a fake one. The town of Paradise Valley in Arizona has installed license plate scanning cameras in fake cactuses with no public consultation whatsoever. Yeah, they don't ever ask us, just like Jade Helm. They could care less once we find out either. It says just days after the DHS announced it's going to revive a nationwide version of the program. Remember when we reported on that last year? Remember when Drudge picked it up and started talking about it and everybody said, oh, license plate readers. We never were going to do license plate readers. That's not going to happen. Forget it. Then it all dies down, and guess what they're doing? Now they're planting fake cactuses with cameras in it so they can read your license plate. The Valley Police said that they were not prepared to make a statement at this time. Again, stonewalling the local news who's asking them about it. They say the network was similarly rebuffed when they attempted to get answers on license plate scanners that were being installed in traffic lights back in February. In other words, it's none of your business, and we're not going to tell you. Now, along the lines of whether or not Congress is going to do something, we see on Breitbart that Rand Paul came out and says, we're going to take the NSA all the way to the Supreme Court and win. And I hope he does. And we need to remember and we need to respect the fact that Rand Paul is one of the very few people who has done anything about this. And the real problem, though, is that Congress is doing absolutely nothing about it. They have shirked their responsibility. They're not doing anything. And so one senator goes out and he tries to take it through the courts because he can't get his colleagues to do what they should do. And I'll tell you what they should do. I think that if you've got a criminal organization that is violating their charter, violating the law, violating the Constitution, doing it all in secret, operating as some kind of a black op criminal organization, maybe you stop funding them. Maybe you just cut it out. They don't have the guts to do that, not in Congress. Maybe Rand Paul would, I don't know, but he's going to take it to the Supreme Court, he said, if necessary. Now, going back to the court decisions, because we've got multiple court decisions that come out. One of them says this is not something that's going to fly, And then the other one says, no, that's fine. You can do dragnet surveillance of people's license plates. You can do StingRay and all that sort of thing. And of course, it's going to go back and forth as it goes up through the courts, and eventually it'll bounce around to the Supreme Court. Do we really want our rights determined by some politically appointed judges, 9 individuals that are not elected, not accountable, can never be taken out? I don't think so. The real issue is, can we read the Constitution? And there was an interesting article that my wife sent me, which I think they got it completely wrong. They were complaining about Antonin Scalia, saying that the Constitution was dead. He went to an organization here at SMU in January, and he said, it is dead, dead, dead. Now, you may look at that and say, yeah, they ignore every aspect of it, but that was not what he was talking about. He was saying it was dead, 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 in contrast to the idea that is put out that it is a living document. And when they mean that, what they're doing is they're just deconstructing it so that they say the words mean whatever we say the words are. If you change the meaning of the individual words and you ignore the original intent, that's the concept known as originalism, if you take it out of the context of the deliberations of the Constitution, if you take it out of the context of the original meaning of the language, then you can twist it and mesh it around to mean anything that you wish. That's why we continue to see the courts making different decisions, along with the fact that they are politically interested, politically controlled. Now, what was interesting about this article, and it was on addictinginfo.org to me, was they said, oh, the founders thought it was a living document. And first they quote Thomas Jefferson, who says that, in response, he says, well, we might as well require man to wear still the same coat which fitted him when as a boy, as civilized society, to remain ever under the regimen of their barbarous ancestors. In other words, what he's saying is there ought to be a means to change the Constitution. And of course, they provided a legitimate means to change the Constitution, other than just ignoring what it says or reinterpreting the language. And then they go on to quote Madison. And this is what is interesting, because they took it out of context completely and they twisted his words and it to mean exactly the same thing, illustrating how they do this to the Constitution itself. This is the quote from Madison. He says, I entirely concur in the propriety of resorting to the sense in which the Constitution was accepted and ratified. And that sense alone is it a legitimate Constitution. If that's not the guide in expounding it, there may be no security for a consistent and stable, more than for a faithful exercise of its power. Now, as I read this, the language sounds very stilted to you, doesn't it? Yea, verily. Isn't this true, right? It's not the way we talk today. Words change, grammar changes. Nevertheless, you can look at this and you can understand what it is saying. And I'll go on and finish the quote. He says, if the meaning of the text be sought in the changeable meaning of the words composing it. In other words, words are going to change in meaning over time. It is evident that the shape and the attributes of the government must partake of the changes to which the words and phrases of all living languages are constantly subject. What a metamorphosis would be produced in the code of law if all of its ancient phraseology were to be taken in its modern sense. To me, maybe I'm wrong, but to me, what he's saying is that if you take it in the modern sense, if you look at a well-regulated militia, for example, and you only think about regulated as meaning it's got a lot of laws attached to it, and you don't understand the militia, maybe you've gotten it in about the 5th generation of distortion of our government, where you think it's some wild yahoos running around in camo in the woods. If that's what you think the militia is, and if you think regulated means that it's got a lot of laws to keep them under control, then you're not going to understand the Second Amendment or the purpose of it or the concern that our founding fathers had about a standing army. It's very important that we understand that just because the founders didn't have phones doesn't mean that the Fourth Amendment doesn't apply. That is our personal effect. That is our person. Those words are very clear. Their concepts are very clear. You can understand what the original intent was. It isn't rocket science. They just use this idea of a living constitution, of a living document, to obfuscate that, to use the fact that words have changed over generations to make them mean something completely different. They understand that very well. That's why they change words like liberal. It means something very different than it did even 100 years ago. Well, stay with us. When we come back, we're going to look at some of the results of the out-of-control war on drugs. You won't believe what happened in Georgia. We're going to talk about refugees who had to go to Colorado to take care of their relatives. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
chemical spill contaminating the water supply in 9 West Virginia counties.
What are the health effects of having these drugs in our drinking water?
It's forced medical treatment without the consent of residents.
My friends, water filtration is one of the most basic actions you can take to protect you and your family from the harmful toxins and heavy metals in your tap water.
On average, the county says it sprays with the glyphosate at least once a week.
Few filters cut out the glyphosates that is found in water supplies worldwide. Remove pesticides, herbicides, chloramines, hydrofluorosilicic acid, sodium hexafluorosilicate.
Fluoride is in tea, it's in coffee, it's in water, it's in bread, it's in toothpaste.
It is our responsibility to protect our families. The establishment's not going to do it. It's time to take action. It's time to filter our water.
Go to InfoWarsStore.com today, and for a limited time, use the promo code WATER20 and get 20% off all ProPure products. Again, that's InfoWarsStore.com, or give our crew a call at 888-253-3139.